Hi, everyone. Fantastic. Well, we'll make a start on this afternoon's webinar. So a very warm welcome. I'm Lizzie Catford, the Director of Children's Books at Book Trust. So Book Trust is a children's reading charity. We work with families and children from birth all the way up to the end of Key Stage 3 to promote reading for pleasure. And that is because reading to children, sharing stories with them, and supporting children and young people to develop a reading habit to read regularly and by choice is linked to so many transformative benefits for them. And in particular, there are very, very strong links between reading for pleasure and strong wellbeing outcomes, which is what we're here to explore this afternoon. So we'll make a start. Just to begin with, there are a few housekeeping rules that I'll just need to run through. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we are going to be recording this afternoon's webinar, and we will be sharing it with you afterwards. So you can have it to reference back with or to share with any colleagues that you think may benefit from any of the conversation or insights that are shared today. Please do submit questions in the chat box, and our panel will answer as many as they can at the end of the session. So please add them in as we go along, and we will at the end. We've got quite a few people struggling with the audio. A couple of people can hear me. I think is somebody from the Book Trust team able to put some messages into the chat? I think we might need a couple of people to maybe try and rejoin is probably the best thing, or to check their settings. So just says well that we will also share these slides with you. So do watch out for an email from us. It will come through over the course of this week just to share the recording and to also share any slides. But yeah, a very warm welcome to everybody. And as I said, we're going to be exploring those wellbeing benefits of reading, because children, especially at this age, choosing to read regularly and by choice will have better mental well-being, stronger emotional regulation, and higher self-esteem, which, given the kind of broader picture that we see around sort of rising anxiety levels within our young people, but also, in the words of our children's laureate, Frank Cottrell-Boyce, this kind of happiness recession that we seem to be in a country at the moment, anything that kind of supports our young people to kind of feel recognised, to be able to build connection, and to be able to help them to explore feelings and emotions is a really powerful tool that we have within our power kind of as educators. So we have a really jam-packed agenda today, and I'm really delighted to welcome some really wonderful speakers to share some insights today around this topic. So firstly, we'll be hearing from my colleague at Book Trust, one of Book Trust's research officers, Fiona Abades-Barclay, who will be sharing some of the kind of latest research, the broader evidence base around the links between children's reading and wellbeing. So Fiona is a senior research and impact officer at Book Trust. Previously, she worked in schools for over 10 years as both a teaching assistant and tutor. She holds a PhD in critical media and cultural studies, and she recently completed postdoctoral research at the London School of Economics, exploring children's digital literacy and their ability to recognise misinformation. After that, we'll be in conversation with librarian Lucas Maxwell. So Lucas is originally from Nova Scotia in Canada. He's been a secondary school librarian in London for over 15 years. In 2017, he won the SLA School Librarian of the Year Award and was named the UK Literacy Association's Reading for Pleasure School Reading Champion in 2022. And I don't think Lucas is a very kind of vocal and proud supporter of Dungeons and Dragons, and the author of Let's Roll, a guide to setting up tabletop role-playing games in your school or public library, which is a fantastic way of getting young people engaged imaginatively, creatively, and really great access into reading. We're also joined by Radhika Sanghani, who is one of our Bookbuzz 2025 authors, with her absolutely brilliant book, The Girl. I can't share because background. Hopefully you can see coming in and out, but The Girl Who Couldn't Lie, which is such a kind of fresh and kind of funny and fabulous read, really. And through this book, you really do explore a lot of the kind of, we have a really strong kind of central protagonist, Priya, who's under so much pressure. Kind of, she's just a regular kid, but under pressure with her friendship, under pressure at home, under pressure from wanting to succeed in gymnastics, and kind of exploring her story and how she manages all of that. But Radhika works as a journalist and has featured in many newspapers and magazines. She's also a screenwriter. She appears regularly on Radio 4's Women's Hour. And she's also a TEDx speaker on body positivity, a yoga teacher, and runs a charity initiative with Age UK, fighting loneliness in older women. So welcome, and we're really interested to hear about your book. And she will be in conversation with my colleague Emma Zipfel, who oversees much of our work with authors and illustrators at Book Trust. Emma has a background in secondary English teaching and runs the Book Trust Represents programme, which provides a series of virtual author visits, along with supporting resources and books, as well as lots of other fun stuff like competitions around it. So that's what we have ready for you this afternoon. I will be then handing over now to my colleague Fiona, who will be talking us through some of the research insights.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So today we'll be exploring the well-being benefits of reading and what the evidence shows us and why it matters. So we look at how reading isn't just about learning or having fun, but also plays a very powerful role in supporting students' mental and emotional health. So we often find it very easy to link reading to academic success, to better vocabulary, improved writing, and that connection is well known and widely accepted, but sometimes what's a bit less obvious and just as important is the powerful impact that it has in supporting students' mental and emotional health. So during the presentation, we'll be looking at some of the findings from one of our most recent research briefings, which is hyperlinked in this slide, so you can access it afterwards when the slides are sent, which explores the well-being benefits of reading for children and young people. The briefing was written in collaboration with Place to Be, that is a children's mental health charity with over 30 years of experience working with students, families, and staff in schools across the UK. So the evidence on reading and well-being that I will be presenting today comes from a range of studies that focus on younger children and also on adolescents. So while the findings vary slightly by age, today here we'll be focusing on research that includes young people and highlights the patterns that are relevant and applicable to secondary school context and experience. So before we dive any deeper, let's take a moment to just talk about what we actually mean when we say well-being, because it's one of those words that we hear all the time, especially in recent years. But it's important to know that it's not just being happy, like it's much more than that. It covers lots of different aspects of students' lives, from building strong relationships to having a sense of purpose, opportunities for growth. And all of these different factors shape how young people grow, how they learn, and how they navigate the world. Next slide, please. I think there's an editing mistake in this slide, apologies. But with this understanding of well-being in mind, we can now start exploring how reading can play a role in supporting it. So when we look at the evidence of the benefits of reading, research highlights 4 key ways in it supports students. The first one is helping them overcome disadvantages, both in academic achievement and future success, in supporting mental well-being and things such as social skills and strong relationships, which is something we'll be exploring further on, do better in school and progress across the curriculum, and developing imagination, empathy, and creativity, which we'll be also exploring a bit today. So as you can see, 2 of these key areas, and arguably all of them, are connected to students' well-being. Next slide, please. So the research shows very, very clearly the impact that reading has on well-being. And here we've selected a few stats that I'll talk through. So the first one is that the enjoyment of reading among young people is linked to better health later in life. The evidence that we've been looking at very strongly also suggests that reading is linked to increased empathy. So I'm going to jump to the last one and then I'll go back to the middle one. But what the research says is specifically with fictional stories, it has been found to be associated with the development of empathy in children and young people, suggesting that there is an important link between the empathy felt for fictional characters and the ability to empathize with others in reality. And I wanted to share with you a very interesting article that I came across just last week, and it's fresh off the press, recently published. This one focused on young children, but we'll see why it's relevant here. So it was looking at how children's brain respond differently when reading a book with an adult versus watching a story on a screen. So book reading activated more areas in the brain, and particularly on the right side of the brain, an area that is called the temporal parietal junction, which is linked to empathy, social interaction, imagination. And screen time, on the other hand, showed less brain activity, and it was more evenly spread. So while this particular study was done with younger children, I think it's highly relevant for understanding young people, especially as we look at reading habits and media exposure and how they continue to shape the brain in very different ways, especially throughout later stages of childhood. Similar research has been conducted with young adults, but at the moment, there's still a bit of a gap with pre-adolescents and adolescents. But what's interesting is that a lot of the research shows that there is a continuity between childhood, adolescence, and then adults in the way we engage in fiction and connect it with the real world. And I think that from an academic perspective, it's just really exciting to see like neuroscience starting to explore this topic and giving us more evidence of the strong links between reading and empathy. And something that was really interesting in this particular study is that it found that the more immersed and emotionally engaged the children were with the reading, the more this part of the brain was activated, which connects to the middle stat that I've got here, that is the engaged readers are 3 times more likely to experience a higher mental well-being. And I think that what's interesting here is that, especially like for students with special education needs, this engagement also includes like more gentle ways of like connecting, being curious, having that emotional resonance with what's being read and like engaging in their own way, which can be very powerful. So it's not just about the decoding the words and the academic parts, but it's also about being drawn to different types of text and understanding that are also like accessible and affirming and allow them to like connect in curious ways to the different stories. Next slide, please. So, but what are the different well-being benefits? So like here we've put together this visual model to help explain a bit clearly like something that is quite complex and difficult to pinpoint. So beyond simply having a book to unwind or for its academic benefits, in this, so basically this is what often comes to mind, no? Like we see that reading offers much more deeper emotional benefits. So just like we were saying earlier, that well-being is a multifaceted concept, the benefits it offers students are too. For example, in this visual we've put together, we can see how these benefits take place both internally, which would be these benefits that we see in green, and then also their relationship in others, which would be externally in blue. So in this visual, we can see how the different areas all come together to show the broad impact of reading on well-being. So what's important to note here is that these internal and external benefits aren't separate, but they're deeply connecting. So reading helps build a student's inner world, which then ripples and shapes how they engage and interact with the world around them. So for example, if we take self-awareness, so when young people identify with characters in books, they often begin to recognize and understand their own emotions more clearly. So books create this like safe space to explore like the feelings, the challenges, the characters, the different characters in the books face. And this internal process in turn develops an emotional insight, which then leads to greater empathy, stronger social skills. So when someone understands how a character feels in a difficult moment, you learn to relate better to others in real life, whether that is showing more kindness or handling conflict more thoughtfully, without even realizing. What we're doing is reading encourages to imagine what's it like to be in characters' shoes and comparing their reactions to situations that maybe students have, thinking of how they've responded in the past or how they might respond in the future, but having in mind what they've just read. And next slide, please. And the evidence goes further to show the important role that you have as teachers and librarians to get the most out of these well-being benefits, especially around building the enjoyment of reading. So one particular role that the research really highlights is in the scaffolding and supporting book choices, especially in exploring the diverse range of books out there, because for us as adults, like we usually know what types of books we enjoy and we naturally reach for those, but with pre-adolescents and adolescents, it's like a great time and a great opportunity for really like introducing to a range of different genres and starting allowing them and helping them a bit to start to build a toolbox of options of different books that they might want to reach out in different moments and stages in their life. For example, if they want to disconnect, maybe as you can see here in this table, it connects the different genres to different well-being benefits. Fiction is really well researched that it helps a lot with escapism. So in fact, there's this very well-known cognitive psychologist that's called Keith Oatley, who compares fiction to, he calls it the mind's flight simulator. So what he says is just like pilots can practice flying without leaving the ground. When a student is reading a book, maybe the character is in danger, like their hearts might start to race, they might gasp if something happens, but there's that security that that's not really happening to them in real life. So it really offers this really like safe space to help understand others and the experience what others may be feeling, and gives that space as well to process and reflect upon it in a very safe way, which I thought was a really powerful analogy, a very interesting way of putting it. And I know that I've talked a lot about empathy, but when the research is really clear in like the benefits, especially around empathy. And as I said, there's a lot of neuroscience that's looking into it. So yeah, it's very exciting to see all of this evidence. And yeah, I think that this table that there's here is a great example of how reading isn't just a skill to be learned or a way to unwind, but it's such a layered and rich experience that touches on so many different things. And yeah, that's a bit of the evidence here. Like there's so much. I've tried to highlight some of the important and interesting findings that we found, but if you want to dive deeper, dive a bit more deeper into the briefing, you can access it online. As I say, I think tomorrow the slides will be shared and they're hyperlinked in one of the first slides. And it's a very interesting briefing where Place to Be has also written a piece of the positive role that books and stories have had in supporting their therapeutic role in schools. So yeah, thanks for listening. And if you have any questions or want to know anything about the evidence, the studies that I've mentioned, please don't hesitate to write your question in the chat.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That was absolutely fascinating. And I think it, as you say, we all, everyone kind of working in the space kind of recognises the complex nature of reading. But I think, of course, kind of that kind of developing those strong kind of functional reading skills remains really important. But it's really interesting to see just how it sort of is much more kind of, it's much broader than that and much richer in terms of what it's enabling for our young people when we encourage them and enable them to develop these strong reading habits. I'm looking at the chat and what I'm seeing is lots of enthusiasm for your slides and also for links to the article that you mentioned, as well as some links to that research. So I think we will definitely be sharing those. So please do everyone look out for an email later this week, and please do feel free to share with colleagues. I think it's really powerful to kind of know what's happening for our young people when we enable them to become positive readers and to experience the kind of joy of reading. Brilliant. So thank you very much, Fiona. now I will welcome Lucas to kind of
Hi.
to take centre stage. Welcome, Lucas. Thank you so
Thank you.
much
Thank
for
you.
joining us. It's really lovely to see you again.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to kind of ask about this from your perspective in school, because we are hearing a lot about kind of rising anxiety levels of young people. We've seen a generation obviously go through the kind of COVID crisis, and thinking about my son, who's just about to start secondary school next year. He was one of those children kind of year one and year two when it happened. And it's just really interesting. Do you recognize, is this something that you recognize when you're working with students and when you're thinking about how you promote reading to them?
Thank you very much. And first of all, yeah, very grateful to be here. And absolutely, I don't think I've seen more issues around mental health. I've been there in this particular school, Glenthorne High School, 12 years now. And yeah, after we came out of the pandemic, it just seemed much more noticeable. If any librarians here, of course, in the audience or in the group will know, it's very prevalent. Mental health concerns, issues, especially with secondary students and secondary age students. And so, but what's been encouraging, I guess, is that engagement in the library has been also exponentially more busy in my experience, which is great. So, which is why every school needs a library and a librarian and a good budget to do that. But which we all know. But so when we're thinking about the things that when I'm thinking about mental health, I'm just thinking about things that have occurred recently, and different events and things that we do. So, for instance, our comic book club and our manga club is one of our busiest ones. And when we run a club like that, it's full of students of ages 11 all the way up to ages 16, 17 even. And that's the great leveler in many ways for me, because I'm seeing how these kids are coming together in a normal, quote unquote, normal setting. That age gap makes a big difference in high school, but it doesn't when they're coming together for like a club. And I've got a year 8 boy who runs his own. It's hard to explain it, but it's kind of like a mixture of Dungeons and Dragons and Street Fighter. It's dice and different weird things, but it brings together all of these different age groups, and he runs it. I'm there to support. But what I do is promote all the books around it, and the book borrowing is absolutely through the roof. And I think when I see kids coming in, when we do things like activities like choose your own adventure sessions with our SEN students who come in, we bring them in smaller groups. And what we do is I read a section of a choose your own adventure book, and then we vote on our path that we're going to take. And I did this recently, and it's a huge success. And we take turns reading and voting on which path. It's always they always choose the most dangerous path, but it's hilarious and fun. But it's reading aloud and reading together, and those books get borrowed immediately after the session, and you can see that it makes a big difference. And I ran a Reading for Pleasure challenge for staff over October half term, where simply read for 20 minutes a day over October half term instead of maybe doom scrolling on your phone, and then report back to me. And everyone who did it got entered into win like a Waterstones tote bag. And the feedback was amazing from the staff as well, which is just shows the difference, and also introduced them to great books. So I see every day, and everyone here who works with students, etc., or whoever can also, I'm sure they also see, we see every day the impact that it can have. 100%. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think I mean, everything there speaks to kind of, I guess, how libraries sit at the heart of the school community, and how reading as well. I think still there are a lot of those kind of conceptions that it's a quiet and silent activity. And of course it can be, but also it's a really sociable activity. And talking about books is a great way of kind of exploring and chatting together and meeting new people. And, absolutely brilliant what you're talking about there. So one of the things we did want to talk about was just, I guess, year 7, because it's one of the things we think about a lot of Book Trust, and in particular with our Bookbuzz program, is that kind of transition moment into secondary, which is quite a big moment for kids. And I'll say I'm just starting to navigate that as a parent. And I know you use the Bookbuzz program as part of how you kind of initiate students into the library, how you engage them. And can you tell us a little bit about that and how you do that
Sure.
and how you kind of build in these kind of broader kind of sociable experiences and
Absolutely. Yes. So how we run with year sevens is to introduce them to the library and how the library works, and basically to give them it's very overwhelming, as you know, when you're going into secondary school. Our school is very big. So our school is it's like 6 times the size of the town I grew up in Nova Scotia. So it's ridiculous. It's 1,800 kids, and the year seven group is around 300 kids, which for me is massive. And I want to introduce it in a way that is obviously welcoming. They need to know how welcome they are in the library, that everybody's welcome in there. And it's easy to forget maybe if they're coming from a secondary school that didn't have a library, which is a sad fact, that, sometimes they're like, can I actually take these books out, or how much does it cost, and things like that, and just to remind them of that. But with Bookbuzz, my colleague and I who work in the library created an escape room, and I don't have time to go through every intricate detail of this process. It is chaotic. They get up and move, but it is really good and it works. And I can obviously send details to anyone. We can share email addresses or whatever.
fantastic.
But essentially, it uses the Bookbuzz books in an escape room format where students are put into different groups. They're all working together against a time. So I'm very lucky that I have dedicated library lessons. So each lesson, each English teacher, and the English teacher gets involved as well, which makes it really fun because they're sometimes meeting these English teacher for the first time that week, and it's a bonding experience, and we're timing them, and the group that does it the fastest gets like a prize of some kind. It's always homemade. Everybody gets a prize at the end, but the group that does it the fastest gets a little extra. But anyway, the Bookbuzz books are used in ways where there are ciphers and clues and riddles all about the books that lead them down a path where they have to the end thing is where they solve a math equation. So I have a big treasure chest with many, many locks on it. And let's say, for instance, let's say they found one of the clues, which will be a piece of paper with some invisible ink. They found somehow, the other group found the flashlight, the little light, and the light will shine on the page number. They've worked out which book, one of the Bookbuzz books. They put this laminated page over the correct page, and it
Wow.
reveals a word. That word is one of the clues to the lock. So we have locks that have like some of the answers are words. So for instance, it might be the word clunk or something, and they just have to figure it out. And that will get rid of one of the locks, but eventually they have to get rid of about 6 or 7 different locks. So they're in little groups of 3 or 4, and it just uses it in many different ways. There are mazes they have to solve, math equations, tons of little different riddles, and it just, of course, introduces them to all these great Bookbuzz books, introduces them to the
Mm.
library, and they learn how the library kind of works, and they work together. At the end, our older library assistants make like little friendship bracelets with the names of the Bookbuzz books on the friendship bracelets, kind of like that, and they get to take them home, of course, and bookmarks. That we make. So yeah, and it works really well, and it's probably one of our most popular thing that we do because they will add not the downside, but the thing is they will ask from September to July,
Mm.
when are we doing the next one? And it's a huge amount of work, but it's a lot of fun.
It sounds an incredible amount of work, but I cannot
It's
imagine just how hyped the kids must be about
they love
the
it.
books, and also how comfortable after having that really positive experience they must feel in the library. So
Yeah.
I mean,
And
it
to
sounds absolutely fantastic.
and to take the Bookbuzz books home with them
Yeah,
is massive because again, some of them they cannot believe that they are keeping these books, and we know that the benefit of book ownership, of course, and they sometimes are just. When do I have to bring it? You have to constantly remind them, which is fine. I love it. It's just like you don't return these books,
yeah.
and they absolutely love it. So yeah, yeah. It's been great. It's
Fantastic.
really been great.
Oh, fantastic. And also, like, obviously, we talked a lot about what you did year seven. I know you do something slightly different with year eight, because year
Yeah,
eight's another big moment of transition, isn't it?
yeah,
Like, kids in
yeah,
that year are going to become teenagers. It's another kind of, and those teenage years are tough to some extent, on from an emotional perspective, always have been, let
yeah.
alone within the kind of current context. So you kind of do things a little bit differently. You kind of mix it up a bit for year eight, don't you?
I try with year eights because, as you said, sometimes even at year eight level, we're seeing now, again, post-pandemic, I'm sure there's smarter people than me doing this research, but post-pandemic, there's I've noticed year eights, some of them all like showing a little earlier on that they're too cool for school. Usually that happens at like year nine for me, but I see this happening a little bit younger. It could be the online content they're ingesting as well, which is, you cannot stop that tidal wave. But with year eights, what we're doing with a couple different things, just to introduce them quickly to the books. And the BookBuzz books have been great, of course, because you get to take them home again, and they will ask that, do we get to do this again? I am working on a different kind of escape room with them, but what we've done in the last year or so is essential, which is essentially, which I'm sure a lot of librarians here have done, but it's really effective and it's easy. It's basically musical chairs without any elimination. I play music, and it has to be music that I enjoy, so they get to hear a lot of classic rock, which they look at me like, who's this 90-year-old man? And they walk around, and when the music stops, they get 3.5 minutes with a BookBuzz book, rating the blurb, the cover, and the first page, whatever they can read. They mark it out of 10 on a sticky note. Take the sticky note with them to keep doing it till each of them get about 5 or 6 different books, or different. I might mix in a few other books as well, and but they love it. It's been, again, one of our most popular ones. So I've been doing that as a way to, like, a little bit, because we know that their attention spans are
Yeah.
shrinking, as mine is as well, and they'll do that. And then we were doing bowling for books, which I've done. It's also a little chaotic, but again, it's a great bonding experience where they are given a little plastic bowling pin with this is a great way to remind them how the library is set up, because I have it set up alphabetically by author's last name, but also I have some genre sections, which helps, like graphic novels and horror
Yeah.
and detective stories, etc. But they will get the BookBuzz books and some other books, and there'll just be the name of the book and the author on a pin, and they just have to simply find the book. And because after my little spiel on how to use the library, if they find the book within a certain time period, these little groups, they win the pin, and then they set the pin up like like a regular bowling alley, and their English teacher gets a bowl. I sometimes I'm harsh. I'm like, you only get one bowl, but if I feel bad if they miss, or like some of them miss, like they throw it, hits the ceiling, because it's just a plastic bowling ball. So I give them maybe three rolls, and I mark their score. I have like an old-fashioned style bowling score sheet. They get to mark their scores in, and again, this group that gets the highest score on their teacher's bowl, because they're cheering on their teacher. They've
Yeah.
done all this work. They've learned about the books. They get to keep the books home, and they win some prizes. They win some prizes, and they take it very
Yeah.
seriously. They come in the library. It also brings these kids into the library that might not use it all
Yeah.
the time, because they're coming in to check the scores. Has another group beat our class, and they absolutely love it. Yeah, it works really well. It's fast
Um,
paced, and a little
I
chaotic.
really
It's
like
good.
that. And I think that fast pace and that kind of making it really interactive and kind of almost like even when you talk about the musical chairs bit, the fast pace of it, that they have to do it quickly, kind of takes the pressure off almost, because
It does.
partly why we developed BookBuzz from Book Trust was to support those kids, I guess, who find it really hard to choose a book. So
Yeah.
the choices, like being able to choose a book and having that sense of autonomy, is a really important kind of mechanism in supporting children to want to read. But of course, if you aren't used to libraries and you haven't, like, it can be a really overwhelming experience for a young person to kind of be told, right, go choose something, go and
Yeah.
like you can
Yes.
and go find it. And obviously,
Oh
what we
yeah.
do with BookBuzz is kind of create the curated list of books. We have things like the videos, so people can pitch their book, and like like you're saying, like all the time, just taking that pressure off in the same way that you did through making it that kind of communal experience and up in the pace. So it's almost like, don't worry about it, just do it. Like, you've got a
Yes.
couple of seconds, don't agonize. I think sometimes kids can get really kind of that feeling of like, I don't know, I don't know what I like or what to choose. And it's a great way of taking that pressure off. So that's
That
brilliant.
That's a great point, because with the musical book tasting, I used to put a question on a sheet that said, "What genre is the book you're seeing?" in the first 3 minutes, and I realized that they were putting up their hands and asking me what the genre was, because they were
Yeah,
worried about making a wrong choice. And I was like, "Oh no, there's no wrong." So I just remove all that. Just tell me what you think of
yeah,
it. So that's that feeling of being overwhelmed or is huge. They come in. We have 11,000 books in our library, which is amazing, but also it's my job to make sure they don't feel overwhelmed, and it's a great way to do it. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Fantastic. Brilliant. And last question, I was just going to ask you, because I know obviously you use BookBuzz at the start of the year to kind of really engage the kids, get them really excited. But then obviously throughout the year, you've already mentioned a couple of things that you do through the clubs that you run.
Mhm.
But it's really important, isn't it, to kind of keep that momentum going across the
Yeah.
year with young people, keep them engaged with the library, keep them engaged in reading. And could you just share any kind of top tips that you have around that?
Keeping them reading and keeping them going. For me, I mean, and I'm fully aware that any librarian in the audience, I fully am aware how lucky I am that we have these dedicated library lessons. So for me, they are key because they come in once every 2 weeks, and the head of English for the whoever's been the head of English for the past 12 years has just let me run them, and the English teacher's been there to support, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But that has been absolutely key for me to be able to relentlessly promote books and read with them. So modeling the reading, I spend 10 to 15 minutes just sitting down with them, reading silently for a few minutes, helping them get things happen in libraries, but helping them find new books, etc. But pairing them up with clubs has been crucial, and we run a lot of clubs. So we talked about D&D. I could do, I feel like I could do like a university course on it at this point, but I won't do that. Basically, any fantasy-based books will be promoted to the D&D club, which is they are ravenous for that stuff, and that's a big thing that I've noticed. We have a lot of boys, especially. We have a great mix of people who join the club, but there are a lot of boys years 7, 8, also 9s, and uh, if you ask them in the corridor, what they think about reading for pleasure, they probably would say they don't like it. But they are in the library every day reading these manuals and making
Yeah,
their own stories and just absolutely obsessed with it. So it has a huge impact. And then I get to subtly like bring in these books, Bookbuzz or any book about with fantasy base, and they will go out, they will be borrowed, and they will check them out. So pairing them up with different clubs has been key. Partnering with the music department and doing open mics and using books that way to promote novels in verse or any novel that has like a performative aspect to it in it is really key. I will just take a few minutes because we have 120 kids crammed into that library to watch their friends perform in the open mics, and I suddenly have an audience of kids that maybe don't come in the library that much during the week.
yeah,
And here we go. We can now promote all of these different books. And I use every little scrap of opportunity, bringing in teachers to do as many different aspects of the taking part in many different clubs or programs as we can. So our comic book club is currently tomorrow are raising money for charity, and they're doing commissions. Our little year 8s are drawing books, drawing manga characters for anyone who wants to pay a pound to raise money for charity. I'm gonna have a big table of all of our comic books and things like that out there, and any book. So I can kind of like I can tweak it to anything like regarding with Bookbuzz. I just I read through the books, and I make sure I can then
yeah.
how do I pair that with a club that is already on, and that has been that's why I think the books get borrowed so much, and we have such an engagement with them, in my opinion.
Amazing. Well, Lucas, the kids in your school are so lucky. There's just so much going on, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. There are lots of questions, I think, in the chat, but we're going to come back to those.
Sure, yeah, of course.
We'll come back at the end. So thank you, Lucas. What I'm now going to do is pass over to my colleague Emma, who will be in conversation with Radhika about her book.
Welcome, Radhika. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure Lucas's school is really looking forward to Gymnastics Club on the back of your book. So your amazing book for Bookbuzz this year is The Girl Who Couldn't Lie. And it features a character who tells white lies to avoid disappointing or upsetting others. And then, through wearing a bangle that her grandmother leaves her, she suddenly finds that she is incapable of telling a lie. And she's challenged to be honest, but without hurting the people she loves. So what led you to choose this theme to explore in The Girl Who Couldn't Lie?
So it really came from personal inspiration. This is The Girl Who Couldn't Lie is my first children's book. I've been writing adult up until then. I'm now writing more middle grade and YA. And I just remember thinking, like, what do I want to say to younger children? Like what is the message I want to share with the next generation? And I thought, what's the message I needed when I was that age? And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I was such a people pleaser. And I lied all the time, not in a naughty, mischievous way, but because I didn't want to upset or worry anybody. And as an adult, I've learned to not do that, and I actually have stopped lying in my life. And I just thought, I've learned so much from doing these things. I want to share that with children today. I actually dedicated the book to my younger self because it felt like such an act of, this is the message she needed. And I know that I think many other children need this message today. I know people pleasing is really common with young girls, but even, the idea of lying and not sharing things and hiding, I think every child can relate to that. And the real message of the book ultimately is a message of, vulnerability. When you're vulnerable with people, that's when you create connection. And that's what Priya learns. When she's honest, her life gets better. So it's a message I just really, really wanted to share with children. And I still, every time I write a book, I really think, what is the message I want to share here? Not just, the funny story and the magic and the drama and the hilarity of it all, because I always write comedy, but what message do I want to share?
Yeah, thank you. And as I think Lizzie mentioned at the beginning, it is a really funny book, but then it has so much heart and it's exploring all these issues and kind of is really empowering actually for young people to read, which is great. How do you think that reading stories that young people can relate to, so stories that explore diverse characters and experiences, can help them to explore their own emotions?
Yeah, I just believe this is so true. And I really think back again to, my childhood, because ultimately the reason I'm writing books is because books meant so much to me when I was younger. And, I was obsessed with Jacqueline Wilson. And her books, they are just so diverse. I feel like she wasn't afraid to kind of go there with the difficult stories or, dysfunctional families or those big feelings of loneliness, not fitting in. And even if I couldn't particularly identify with the exact story that a character was going through, like Tracy Beaker, I had no experience of being in an orphanage or anything like that, but I still identified with every emotion. And that's really, really stayed with me. And so I think it's, when I write, ultimately, I just want children to feel seen. That's the biggest thing for me. And I know that when I'm writing about emotions, for example, in The Girl Who Couldn't Lie, there's pressure, there's worry, there's, betrayal, there's fear, there's also the positive stuff, joy, connection, having a crush on someone, the fun stuff. But all of this I know children can relate to, but I also wanted to take it a step further and just make sure, more children could see themselves, because I didn't really see someone that looked like me when I was younger in books. So it was really important to me that I, I make my protagonist British Indian like me. I want to share that experience. And I also, I add in other things, like one of my characters, Priya's younger sister is neurodivergent. She's got ADHD. One of her friends comes out as gay. There's people of all different races, which felt really authentic to my experience growing up in London. That was just, diversity was the norm. So it was important that I reflected that in my books. And what's been so lovely is I do a lot of school visits. I really love visiting schools and children and going, up and down the country. And so I meet so many different children. And they all pick up on something different where they feel seen. Like in one school, all of the questions were about ADHD, and I have ADHD. You can probably see me fidgeting all the time. And yeah, so it was like just being able to make sure they felt seen. And then I went to some schools recently in Leicester, and there were a lot of British Indian children who were just so excited. They're like, oh my God, the girl's got the same skin color as me. And one girl was called Priya, and it was just so lovely to see firsthand what a difference it makes when they feel seen. And I also, I also try and, we're talking a lot about empathy, really put that in the book. So for example, in The Girl Who Couldn't Lie, there's a school bully. And throughout the book, Priya eventually starts to have compassion for the bully because she realized what she's going through. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean she abandons herself. She still stands up for herself, but she does it with empathy and understanding. And so, yeah, it's really important to me that I put in all these little bits, or even if I mention periods, a lot of children are starting puberty even younger. And I just want these things to be normalized so that, boys reading it as well can just be like, oh, yeah, that's the thing. And it's, it's not a huge part of the book, it's just a throwaway line. So I think all of these little things as well just help readers, like connect a bit more to the characters and really explore their emotions.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting what you said about kind of representing all of those different children and all those different experiences in your books. And what's really nice about the way that you do it is it's so incidental. It's not that it's a story about necessarily having ADHD or starting your period, whatever it might be. But these things are just part of life, and they're in there in kind of a really fun and entertaining and way that children can connect with. So yeah, thank you for that. So reading can be looked on as a safe space. So earlier Fiona talked about the flight simulator kind of idea. So a space where young people can experience difficult subjects and learn how to deal with them themselves, or as you've also talked about, kind of how to empathize and understand others' perspectives. How do you take this into consideration when you're planning your books and the stories that you want to tell?
Yeah, so I think like obviously as a writer, like it's just, you know, fun creating a whole new world, new characters, and my books have a lot of magical stuff or, you know, some fantasy, even in one of my YA books. But every time I write the book, I'm also thinking like, you know, what is the message? Like what bits are going to allow a child, a reader to feel seen? What is the thing I want to share with them? And, you know, I also have younger cousins. I speak a lot, obviously, to children when I do visits. And I just try and like think of what could I bring them? Like I feel like every book is an opportunity for me, not just for me to have fun writing a book, but to share something. So for example, one of my new books, How to Get Magically Popular, which is my next middle grade, which is out, I think, in a couple of months. That's you know, it's a story about a girl who meditates so much she becomes psychic. But there's also all these messages in there of how far will you go for popularity, you know, authenticity, what really matters, who are your real friends, all of these things that were so central to me growing up, and I know that children still think about today. And yeah, I mentioned, you know, I've got a YA book, which is sort of young YA, clean teen. It's sort of, yeah, 13-year-olds, I think, is kind of the audience, called Here to Slay. And that's like based on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you know, so my character is just slaying demons, basically, whilst, you know, having a queer love story and going through some other stuff. But again, it's like, I don't just want to write a book where they slay demons. And I really loved the chart that kind of showed what every book gives you. Because I do think, again, there's so much in fantasy and escapism and creativity, but I also just can't help but putting in a little message, you know, that yeah, my character in that book really learns to embrace authenticity and, you know, be who she is and let that be enough in terms of body image, you know, her race, just all sorts of things, like learning to, you know, be okay even if she doesn't fit in the traditional way and eventually find her own people. So yeah, I really do think about this a lot. And I think because I had such firsthand experiences of books helping me feel seen, even if not, you know, in a completely obvious way with representation, at least emotionally. So yeah, it's something I really want to pass on to children now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Radhika, for speaking with us today. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. And yeah, thanks also for the sneak peek on the new book. We'll all be looking out for that in a few months' time.
Thank you
so much for joining us.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think we're going to take a few questions now. Let me just go to the chat and see if we have any. So let me go back through. So lots of comments. Kind of let me see. So lots of enthusiasm for the escape room activity. So somebody's asking, Lucas, if you have any recommendations for choose your own adventure books, because that would be really helpful. So I don't know if you have any that
Absolutely.
you can share.
So the fighting fantasy ones are the ones that I use in the I'm just looking, I should have them ready, but they remade a lot of the fighting fantasy books, and I think Charlie Higson did a few. I know Ian Livingstone used to do them. I didn't have them growing up in Canada, but we had the kind of standard choose your own adventure, but these are really great. I kind of adapt them when I'm reading them out loud because some of them not require, but ask you to actually roll dice. But I do get them to roll some Dungeons and Dragons dice in the lessons because we have smaller groups. So when I run it with our literacy groups who are SEN students and maybe students who struggle with accessing reading material or engaging with books in general. But as I said, I use those almost extensively, but there are some I can always send them out to anyone who asks. I'm happy to have my email address sent. So fighting fantasy #1, but there are some really they're called Choose Your Destiny, and they're Star Wars based. So for any Star Wars fans, we do that. And then Dungeons and Dragons itself has its own series of choose your own path or choose your own adventure books, and they're really popular. I decided, so much so that I decided to do like a section mainly based on video games, YouTube personalities, but gaming in general. So like all of our D&D stuff. There is another one that's out that is but real life, and it's called The Boy with Big Decisions, and that has been really popular. It's by Helen Rudder, who she has brilliant books, but one of the ones that stood out for us was called The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh, which was great. But The Boy with Big Decisions is a choose your own adventure book, and it is super popular. I'd read the first bit to the students, and I can't keep it on the shelves. I need to get more copies. And it's about a boy who, the choice at the beginning is he finds in the bushes in a hedge a jumper that belongs to like this posh school, and if he puts it on, he can get on the bus and go to this posh school and pretends he goes to this really and do you do that, or do you go to your regular school? And they just me reading that hooked them, and it's really cool. So yeah, they love that. So they love the real life, but the fantasy ones are also very popular. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Lots of good recommendations there. And yeah, you're like, it's a nice active way to read, isn't it? Those choose your own adventures, and like having that chance to kind of, and it like pretty much every time I've ever read one, I've ended up dying multiple times, but you go back, doesn't matter, does it? You just go back and you read it, and you find a different path, which is, yeah, it's a really positive experience. I'm just looking to see, I think most people, lots of enthusiasm. We even have, I think, an ex Glenthorne High student but who would have loved to be in your library lessons, so that's fantastic.
Oh wow, thank you. Thank you very much.
And lots of enthusiasm as well, Radhika, for middle grade books coming. And I think that's true, because often what we will hear is that it can be quite a hard age in a way to keep children reading. Like what we have nationally is this kind of increasingly slightly bleak picture, which isn't means that we shouldn't keep kind of fighting the good fight around children's reading, but we are seeing children increasingly disengage with reading, unfortunately, and their reading for enjoyment declining across the teenage years. And I think finding those books that they will connect with is a really important thing to do. Radhika, when you're thinking about it, do you have a particular reader in mind? Or, I mean, you've talked about a lot about how you kind of have had lots of really good conversations when you're out and about with kids. Do you find that there is a particular kind of reader who's drawn to your book, or do you find that you can kind of reach that broad group of children who kind of connect with that kind of contemporary and the kind of humour that's in your books?
You know, I feel like I've actually been really surprised by the students who connect with the books. And actually, I've just seen a question in the chat, you know, about the market being very girl oriented. And yeah, it's really interesting, because I always thought girls would be the ones who come up to me, but there's been so many boys who have really enjoyed it, like boys who are like, I've read it twice. And actually, like, that's been so lovely for me to see that, you know, maybe it's not so obviously gendered, and just because it's a girl protagonist, it doesn't mean only girls are going to enjoy it, because, you know, I feel like, again, the themes, you know, it's a story about someone who can't lie and all the funny things that happen. Like that is I think, and you know, also when I was younger reading books, I feel like I read all the time I read books about boys, and it never occurred to me, you know, that, oh, that's not for me. So I think it's actually really important that you know, like boys read these books too.
I agree.
And they connect with the emotions and the experience.
Yeah. And I think one of the really nice bits of feedback that we get around Bookbuzz that's kind of anecdotal, but we do hear it all the time, is that teachers see students picking out books they wouldn't necessarily have thought they would pick because of the author pitch video, and because they do the activities around the book. They kind of unpack a little bit about what this book is. Sometimes where people might have been putting certain books in boxes in their head and say, well, that one's not for me for these reasons. Actually, when they hear the author talking about them, when they kind of read the blurbs, where they get a little bit under the skin of what the book's going to be about, they then end up choosing it, which is a really nice thing, because it kind of means that students are surprising themselves with what it is that they like about reading. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're slightly out of time now. I've just noticed the time for any more questions. But thank you so much to all of our speakers today. That's been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and thank you to everybody who has joined us. As we've said already, we will be sharing the slides and be sending out an email with them to you over the next week or so, and alongside the recording for today. We've mentioned our Bookbuzz programme a couple of times today. So Bookbuzz, it runs every year from Book Trust, and it's a programme that you can join for your Key Stage 3 students. We curate a selection of 16 titles across lots of different genres and really exciting new books that are publishing. And it's there to really support you with engaging your students in that reading for pleasure, and that developing that reading habit. Is not about that kind of closed experience of reading that, of course, is important that children develop those kind of deep comprehension skills, but it's about them having that positive experience of reading, being supported to know how to choose a book, to feel confident about that, and to crucially have that book which is their own. We are able to do it at a reduced cost of £3.55 per student, so a really good saving on the RRP. I think we've got, if we just click on, you can see the books that are part of this year's selection, but yeah, a really fantastic selection of books, and you can find out more about it on our website. But a huge thank you again to everybody who's joined today. To kind of, I guess, like as we said, reading has so many benefits, but really interesting to kind of look at some of the kind of actual neuroscience and some of that kind of kind of the actual academic studies that sit behind how it does promote that kind of broader links with wellbeing. So yeah, thank you everyone. Have a lovely rest of your days. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.